Well, ladies and gentlemen, oh, you can clap, that's good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what we're about to find out. Does anything ever change in the ever-changing world of sport? With the help of our esteemed panel, I am joined today by Dawn Airey, Chair, FA Women's Super League, Women's Championship Football and the Football Association, Andrew Georgiou, President and MD of Warner Brothers Discovery UK and Ireland, Warner Brothers Discovery Sports Europe. Could you have had a smaller title? I mean, what's that all about, dude? You know what I mean? What's that going on? Stephen Van Rooyen, Chief Executive Officer, Sky UK and Ireland and Group Chief Commercial Officer. Another big title, dudes. And Shay, Segev, CEO of DAZN. Small, I like it. I like it. Smart. Ladies and gentlemen, your panel, please. So let's kick things off with rights, sporting rights and the broadcasting rights. Have we reached the top of the mountain right now? Because, you know, to the everyday person, the figures that are being brandished when you're like purchasing these rights are just astronomical, right? So how do you weigh up the value of sports rights and what does success look like? Andrew, do you want to start?
Yeah, happy to. We heard a lot about the structural changes this morning, especially in the linear business. So we are facing intrinsic rights value headwinds with what is effectively our most profitable form of monetizing premium sports rights, which is cable television. And certainly the cable television viewer base is challenged. We've got headwinds coming through that. We also heard this morning that the streaming platforms, difficult to make profit from streaming platforms, especially if you put expensive sports rights over a short period of time purely on streaming. And I'm sure Shay would want to talk about that. And then you've got a fragmented audience base, which is sitting across multiple different social platforms, the younger audience. And so you do have structural headwinds in being able to monetize sport across different content. But the reality of sports rights is a little bit different because ultimately you also have to think about the competition in the market when you're bidding for those rights.
Because you're bidding against each other, aren't you?
You're bidding against each other. And so you've got to marry up the long-term structural headwinds of cable television whilst protecting your profitability at the same time as warding off competitors coming into the market. So the dynamics around sports rights is difficult and challenging, but we've seen across Europe that it is correcting itself. We're seeing lower sports rights. You see Serie A in Italy, the rights haven't been awarded, but the rights came down in the previous cycle. We saw the challenge of Media Pro in France and what happened there, and the rights came back down in France. So it does feel like we are at the top of the cycle in terms of sports rights.
So you don't think it's going to go any higher?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to go any higher. And on top of that, you've got rights holders thinking that creating more content, which is obviously the theme of this particular conference, thinking that creating more content is actually going to create more value, and all of a sudden then you've got this kind of clash between the expectations of what a rights holder thinks and the realities of the market.
I mean, Shay, Andrew sort of alluded to what you're doing at DAZN, which is incredible, you know. And how do you tackle these headwinds that are coming along, you know, and sail through this nicely? How does your model, you know, make money?
Yeah, so let me first agree with what Andrew said. We do see it, you know, like everything in life, the answer is it depends, right? We see some rights which is really just started. I mean, women's sport is probably a good example, right? It's probably in the beginning of its cycle. But broadly speaking, if you look into the more mature rights, I totally agree with Andrew. Based on the existing business model that these rights have been bundled and marketed with other services, I believe that these rights are probably on their peak. Also, the way that consumer engage with sport today, if you think about it, it's broadly the same to the same way consumer consume sport probably 20, 30, 40 years ago, and this is exactly where companies like DAZN has the reason to exist, right? We established a global business. I mean, if you think about DAZN, we are currently the largest sport broadcaster in Europe, probably smaller than this country, in the UK, but in Europe we are the highest spender on sport, and we keep expanding. We are a pure play sport platform which only focus on sport and crystallize the value of sport from other services. Means if you're a sport fan, you come to DAZN because you like sport, therefore the way to monetize it can be the whole mindset can be different. And our journey is not necessarily just monetize sport through pay TV, which is clearly the more mature model that we've been doing so far, and sponsorship, but also try to develop a further app of services to provide sport fans other ways to consume other sport services, articles, merchandising, ticketing, and any other ways that we can monetize these rights.
So by just solely focusing on sport, it feels like you're saying you're not anchored and you don't have other overheads that you have to worry about. Sport is your main focus.
Yes. By decoupling sport from other services and then widely distributing it, you're getting the ability first to reach to more customers, and by also being a tech-first digital service. Again, let's take an example, right? Probably, let's be more practical example. As you travel, and let's say tomorrow you land in Brazil, and you want to watch the Champions League. We just spoke about it before. How do you watch Champions League in Brazil? You need to have some local broadcaster that you don't have access. Now, it's very clear that where our sport is packaged today and fragmented, it's not very easy to go from where we are today, where we need to go, but it's very clear it needs to go there, right? If you think about the disruption that happened with other type of, TV, series, movies, etc. Today we have global services. I think there is very much needed to have a sport global digital service that can travel with you, and this is again a lost opportunity because you could have monetized this customer who basically wake up in the morning in Brazil and wanted to watch his favorite content.
It's HBO Max in Brazil, if you want to watch the Champions League.
This is what I was thinking.
Thank you for that, Shay. I just want to go on to you, Stephen, because I know, Andrew, you said that you feel we've reached a peak and the rights are not going to go up, but they are still extremely high. And for the everyday viewer, what's worrying is how do you continue to pay those ever rising prices, without passing it on to the consumer? I've looked at my bills for all the apps that I've got, and continually every month it's going up all the time.
Look, I think there's uniqueness to sport, and people are willing to pay a certain price for that or they're not. And we've seen, over the years, relative inelasticity on what people are willing to pay. We've seen prices rise. It doesn't make it okay, but you've got to cover those rights costs. I think the broader answer to the earlier question on how to think about whether we've reached the top of the hill now is I think it's sort of nuanced and situational, because I think depending on the business model that you run, the market you operate in, the rights that are to offer, the competition you're facing and how important it is in your overall package, I think, and the underlying right, whether it's a growing right, a sport that's growing interest or a sport that's in decline, I think it's a mixed bag. Some rights will go up, some rights will go down. It sort of depends on.
But the main rights you're fighting for, all the big, the Premier Leagues, the big boxing, the Olympics, those are not going to go down.
Well, we've seen in other territories they've gone sideways or down. So there's no such thing as never, right? So we don't know, because as I said, it is nuanced and situational. But back to your second question, look, I think when we look at it, we take what I would say is a rational and disciplined view as to what those rights are worth to us as an organization and as a business. And what we'll do is we'll do loads of research. We have, we're in a privileged position to build from quite a lot of data a profile of what something is worth, we believe, to us, to our subscribers, to the marketplace. And between research, externally, and looking at what happens, to viewing or to engagement on our platform, we're able to take a pretty considered view as to what we're willing to pay for. We've walked away from some rights, we've paid for some rights, we've gone up on some, we've gone down on others. So it really does just depends on the variables that are in play for that moment. So I think it's hard to call whether Premier League goes up or down, or Formula 1 goes up or down. I do think it depends on the situation and the nuance of the business.
I mean, we could talk about rights probably for this whole session, but I really want to move things on a little bit now and talk to you, Dawn, and ask you, what are you looking for from broadcasters? What would you like to see them do, especially when it comes to women's sport?
Well, what I would like is
£1
what
billion.
I've just been told.
It's
It's
for
not
the
going to
rights to
happen,
go
which
up.
is more money. Sorry, show me the money, boys.
I've never heard that from you
And
before,
I
Dawn.
have to be very polite because I have some
No, don't be
customers
polite.
here, and then I'll revert to my norm, which is not. But there is, if you look at women's sport compared to men's sport, and you look at the revenues, I mean, have values peaked for men's sporting rights? For sporting rights overall. They might have for men, but I like to think not for women, because at the moment, and this is an extraordinary statistic from Deloitte, so I think a couple of years ago, that women's sports rights globally, that includes attendance, so money taken at the gate, money paid in terms of licensing and sponsorship, is $1 billion globally, $1 billion. Would you like to hazard a guess as to what the equivalent number is for men's sport?
$500 billion.
Yeah, exactly, 471 billion. 0.1, so women's sport is attracting 0.1% of the amount of money that's spent on men's sport. That is quite simply, not outrageous, but quite simply a massive, massive, massive opportunity for the women's game. And listen, I'm not going to repeat all the statistics that you saw up front, which are extraordinary. There's a moment in time that I think sort of, certainly for football, started back in 2019 in Lyon, when the BBC covered that semi-final against the Lionesses against the USA, and the ratings were just around about 12 million. And then you saw it at the Euros, and then you saw an extraordinary thing I think happened during the Women's World Cup, which was in the UK, the reach was 29 million. So 29 million people watched some aspect of the Women's World Cup. Of that, 11.5 million had never watched the Men's World Cup. Interesting. Now, they weren't all
So
women.
you brought in a new
Men and
audience.
women. Yes, exactly.
Completely
And
new
this is the point. There is a new audience for sport and women's sport. Not exclusively, because the majority, so 42% certainly for football, are women. But there's lots of statistics abounding, and you said don't quote anything that you can find on the internet. I don't know that you can find this, but I know that pay TV, and I've got to be very careful quoting this, but there were 2 million more folks who watched sport on pay television last 23 to date versus 22 to date, and a third of that was for football, for women's football. So I think women's football, it has the potential to be one of the biggest sports globally. It's number 4 in terms of viewership in the UK. We've seen massive increase in attendances. We've seen a massive increases in audiences on broadcasters. We've seen an explosion of social engagement. And the women's sport, a little bit like when you compare sort of the global disparities, is the same in the UK. So there is a massive opportunity to both invest in the sport and to grow your audiences so it's aligned with your businesses. Yeah. So we're about to take our rights to market, and I have to tell you, we're expecting a very big increase. Which is why I'm going to be very nice to you. But,
Can I get you to do some deals for me, Dawn?
I'll try.
Amazing. But so what I'm really hearing is there is a potential, and there's a lot of untapped potential.
Yeah.
How do you connect that with what these guys are doing?
Well, they're great partners, I have to say, and I'm looking at Stephen. Sky being a fantastic partner, and one of the tensions you have, as I think, as a rights holder of an emerging sport, which women's football is, because it was banned for 50 years. Thank you very much, FA. Is the competitive tension between you want reach, you want eyeballs, you want engagement, but you also want money. So the last deal that was done, certainly for the WSL, was a very interesting debate with the clubs and with the FA, which is we had to have the reach, it's got to have eyeballs, it's got to be accessible. So we knew it had to be on the BBC, but we wanted also, and we needed, and the game desperately needs investment. We needed Sky's investment, but also just Sky's expertise. You do sport brilliantly, you do football brilliantly. I think women's football, you have an opportunity to do something different in terms of how it's covered, how you engage with those younger audiences. And again, all the metrics would indicate that the women's football audience don't necessarily always go to the traditional platforms for insight, for data about their leagues, about their clubs, about the footballers. They go to, the younger audience we know, they go to TikTok and they go to YouTube. And we've got to balance all of this. But we want the game to grow, and it can only grow and continue to grow with really good partnerships with broadcasters, with really good partnerships with sponsors. But there's a different opportunity. The women's game is doing something different to the men's game.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of what we were trying to do with the Paralympics. And we from 2012 at Channel 4, it moved there and we reached a different audience. Exactly. I think what it's about now is that next stage. How do you take it from that next stage? And
this is the challenge, as Stephen said. He's got a very sophisticated model. They look at it and say, okay, how many, we're getting new subscribers as a result of women's sport. But what I would say is maybe you're not at the moment, but you are this is a sort of an investment phase. It's an investment ahead of hopefully very, very, very significant audiences.
Let me throw this over to Shay and Stephen in terms of growing new sports. Stephen.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, on women's sport, firstly, thank you for the remarks. We really appreciate it. But are we, we think on sort of two axes. The first is, how do we grow a business? How do we grow engagement? How do we grow relevance, right? And, women's sport gives you that opportunity, right? There's an entire audience that's been underserved, and as women's sport has come to the fore.
I guess, hold on one sec. I guess with women's sport, it's more than just growing it, because I think it's already growing. It's about capitalizing on the moment.
It is, and we've had an incredible 12 months, particularly with the Lionesses. But there is a long way still to go to close the gap between a big men's football game and a women's football game, or a cricket game, big men's cricket. There is a big gap to go, right? So, and we're on that climb, and we should be on that climb, because any business person, if you say you can roughly, and forgive the crudeness, like double your market, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you find a way to do that? So there's just good business sense to pursue it on one dimension. The other one is, it's the right thing to do, right? We have to do this. And as sports broadcasters, we have a responsibility to muscle this through and grow. And it is an investment phase, right? And the most important word is it's investment. It's a phase.
And with investment comes risk.
Well, it takes time. I mean, investments tend to be, at an angle, they're not straight up. So we will build over time, and as audiences come, money comes, and as money comes, you can invest more, you can market more, you can get better players, you get better facilities, you get better schedules, all that sort of stuff. And that stuff comes over time, and that's the phase that we're in. We as an organization, whether it's, for every one of our major verticals, going back as long as I can remember, we have been determined to have, equal men and women to the extent the rights are available. So in football, we have it. In cricket, we have it. In golf, we have it. In tennis, we have it. And even in motorsports, we had it until, of course, the W Series passed. So as an organization, we've sort of put our money where our mouth is to grow on those two axes.
I think it'd be remiss of me not to ask all of you, Andrew, Stephen, and Shay, as broadcasters, we've talked about women's sport, but what about with disability sport? Where do you stand with that in terms of growing disability sport? Because when you look at the numbers of disabled people in this country, and you look at what the explosion that we had during the Paralympics, and you talk about doing the right thing, at the moment it feels like, to me, Channel 4 are doing all the heavy lifting. What's going on with you guys? Show us the money.
Well, I'm pretty proud of the US Open coverage that we had. I mean, we did, if you watch what we did there, I think we covered that brilliantly. And I think Channel 4 has done an extraordinary job in leading the charge on that. Alex, well done. I think there's also a supply side question, which is, it's taken a while to set up, women's leagues in different sports. And I think we have to go through that investment phase as well. But absolutely, the right thing to do is to continue to invest and build all forms of sports, because why wouldn't you keep growing the audience, the addressable and applicable audience?
I've got some para football you can have if you want to just help you on your way.
Brilliant. Add it into the list.
Look, I think we can still go on and delve into that in terms of disability sport, but we'll park that just a moment and just talk about the changing landscape of TV. Changing landscape, the way things are moving, how they were, and how you guys are adapting. Maybe Shay, you can come in on this as the disruptor with DAZN.
Sure. So clearly, DAZN is all about innovation and changing the experience for the consumers, right? To make it more clearly, the way we see it, you're really aiming to two type of audiences: the traditional audiences who looking for the lean-back experience, put channel 4, and have a linear experience, basically a passive experience. And then you see our younger audiences. I mean, I see how my kids consume content, which is very different from what I consume. They have a YouTube or TikTok. They don't have a patience more than 5 minutes to watch one clip. They're just moving all around between clip. They want to socialize. They want to chat while they're doing it. And we at DAZN are producing two types of experiences. Interactive social experience, which is more personalized as well, because again, what technology enables you to do today through an OTT, direct-to-consumer platform, is to know who is the consumer, what you're interested in. It's no different than running Amazon, to be honest, right? You have some profiling on the customers, and you know that this is content might be very relevant. And again, and this is an opportunity for us also to start showing other type of content that we believe there is a potential for it as well, and start growing that audiences as well. And by that, serving the audiences in a better way, plus discovering new audiences with new content as well, and make it more social, more fun, more interactive. And it will not be a revolution, right? So I don't think that sport is very traditional. Again, it's very traditional sport, so I don't think it's something which we wake up one morning and will change. It will be a transition. And this is why I see DAZN as an hybrid. On the one hand, we know to play the traditional, we have linear channels. We partnering with big leagues. Again, we see also from content perspective, we just chatted about it before. We see two types of deals we're making. The traditional deals, basically we partnering with Serie A in Italy, with Bundesliga in Germany, with La Liga in Spain, etc. We are now looking into the French league as well. So we're doing this traditional deal, which is very traditional way also to monetize them. And we are investing. I mean, we are the #1 investors in women's sport. We have Women's Champions League, we have Women's La Liga. We last week announced the French League, Women's French League is available on DAZN. The German League is, the Women's German League is available. So we basically have almost all of the women leagues on DAZN. We invest in it. And we believe this is the future. We're discovering, we make a deal with YouTube. So all of this content, or most of it, also available on YouTube as well, to make sure that we're discovering new audiences.
So thanks for that, Shay. But Andrew and Stephen, how do you then compete and move in with what DAZN is doing? Where do you see what DAZN are doing in terms of what you guys are doing? And also, Dawn, how can you capitalize? How can the women's league capitalize on DAZN?
Well, we just want to go where the audiences are and where the fans are. And the fans are, they're both in linear, they're both in pay TV, and they're online. I think we've just got to be ubiquitous, and actually there's enough value actually for everybody. But it's interesting, and that how, and understandably how broadcasters want. They're as interested in the digital rights as they are in the actual game day experience. And all of the insight that we've got about the audiences, certainly for women's football, is they do expect to be able to get closer to the game. They are looking for innovation from the broadcasters. So I think there's a lot of things that also we have to work more closely with the broadcasters about in terms of giving access and looking at how do you cover the game differently. And there's a lot of innovations that you could do. We're not there yet. We're not there as a rights holder. As a rights holder, I don't know if you're necessarily there as a broadcaster, but I know you're always pushing us for doing more. But you think about, why can't, and I'm not saying this is about to happen, but that there are innovations around miking up sort of refs. That's being debated. That you can have cameras on the bench. You can listen to the commentary, of the athletes on the bench before they're potentially going to play. You can get closer to them in the tunnel. You can get to a more intimate experience. And certainly the women's game and the fans, that's what they want to do. You've got to I think you can get closer to grassroots, you can get closer to fandom, you can do that through social. You could do it through but you've got to do it through linear as well, because you want that big match day experience. Sport is about a great match day experience.
I'd be worried where you put the mic in the men's game, actually, how close to the
that would
fans
be
you
interesting.
get.
Just on that point, though, there is a point about access and more content and giving better behind the scenes, and that's certainly something that we're focused on as a business. But the multi-platform approach, and just teasing out what you said before, which is you've got very different audiences who consume their content on the different platforms. Linear television and big screen experiences for sport remains a predominant way of watching the content for predominantly older audiences, but for most audience still.
For how long, though?
Well, and that's the challenge. But it's also the opportunity, because as you think about streaming becoming a new platform, a digital platform, when you heard Dana and the PSBs this morning talk about the move to IP delivery of content versus cable or satellite delivery of content, the engagement opportunity that digital delivery provides is significant. And we always hear about the younger, Gen Z or the millennials having a short attention spans for sport. It's not the case. If the content is engaging and the experience is engaging, millennials and Gen Z as young people can do things for long. Just look at how gaming, for example, if it's engaging, they will engage. And the digital experience and the streaming experience that we build, both on the primary screen as well as on the second screen, if it's engaging enough, then you will get them watching for longer. And the challenge for us is to make the experience engaging, interactive, social. And those are the opportunities which you create by going digital that currently don't exist in the satellite environment. Our hope is over time, and we're in partnership with Sky on this as well, as viewing migrates from linear to streaming and digital, the viewing experience is going to be a whole lot better. It's going to be more engaging for people, and capturing that audience and better monetizing them is going to be the challenge over that time.
But there are two essential strands, right? There's what technology allows you to do to improve the broadcasting experience, but there's also working in partnership with rights holders and leagues to create a better on-screen product, whether it's through format changes, whether it's through access, whether it's through innovation on field or around the field. And you pull those together and you get, I think Andrew's right, you get to a point where using technology and using partnership, you're able to distill something which the consumer gets a much better experience out. They're more engaged in it. I'm with Andrew when everybody talks about, kids are flicking. I'll also watch my son sit down for 3 hours on a game and just not go anywhere. So we're quite dissonant in how we think about, young people today. And I think we'll take the Pepsi challenge over time on whether or not people want to watch big sports on what will
shows
be
how old school you are when you're talking about the Pepsi challenge.
65-inch screen. I think that's sort of how people want to do it, as long as it's engaging and enriching and you're giving them the stats. And I've seen sport come a long way in the last period, not only having forward-thinking rights holders use data to help do better storytelling, to help make it more dramatic, but also, forward-looking rights holders look at formats. I mean, have a look at cricket, as wonderful as the Ashes is and has been, and the long form is. For those traditionalists who love it, look at the 100, or look at the IPL. These are format innovations that bring in new audiences, and they just allow better storytelling for different types of audience, and that is good.
And certainly the conversation with rights holders that we have, more is not necessarily better. You want more premium content that cuts through. That is ultimately what you're striving to achieve. Volume and long-tail content that has minimal impact doesn't suit anyone's agenda. So if it means you need to reduce the number of matches or the schedule or the format, as long as the quality of the content that you're delivering is better, has a better chance of cutting through the malaise of content that's out there, then that's certainly something that we will value more greatly than simply the volume.
So moving on to, this is what DAZN have kind of done, come in and disrupted things. But what about new innovators into the sports broadcasting world? You know, is there room for new innovators, and what would be the challenges for new companies coming in the future?
I think everyone's innovating. I mean, Stephen just talked about it before. It's not as if broadcast coverage of sport has stood still. It has evolved and continues to evolve, whether it be through the access that we get with the players, the clubs, the coaches, whether it's the digital technology that we use to explain the sport to viewers, the augmented and mixed reality studios that are being developed, the development of content for different formats, all the social media platforms, and the huge effort that goes into, by our teams, of bespoke making of content that suits the specific platform that we're designed to get to. There has been huge innovation in the way that content is both created and the way it's being communicated. Is there more to come? Absolutely. There is absolutely more to come, and I think everyone's thinking about how to create that next level of engagement through technology and innovation.
Talk to me a little bit about your the launch of TNT.
No. I've tried to put it behind
security. Let's talk a little bit about that. You know, and last summer it was a big move. You know, what did you, or what are you trying to do with the new TNT Sports and the acquisition of BT Sport as well?
Look, it depends on who you ask, BT or us. We had two different motivations that came together in a very good outcome. So from our perspective, we had a business in the UK around the legacy Discovery channels, and our partnership with Sky, certainly through to the end of 2025 and hopefully beyond, is something that was 3 years away. And the opportunity to work with BT to combine both our existing entertainment portfolio with a premium sports portfolio in advance of the eventual launch of Max in this market is something that we strategically wanted to do. We also saw opportunity in bringing the Eurosport portfolio together with the BT Sport portfolio and creating a better portfolio for the consumer. And by putting that together, not only did we save money across both businesses and actually made that business more sustainable, but it also gave us a fuller, more premium content portfolio to couple together with our entertainment. And that is a journey that we will undertake in this market through 2025, 2026, in partnership with Sky, in order to launch Max in this market eventually.
Great. I want to move on to, because you're all now becoming global players. You know, you have to look at bigger audiences rather than just your local audience. Let's talk a little bit about those challenges in terms of, you know, how you broadcast. Do you think primarily about a global audience, or are you always looking at your local audience first? You know, who's the primary viewer for you?
I think we start with our local audience. You know, we're here to serve fans of, you know, respective sports and leagues in the countries in which we operate and serve. And, you know, there are very few sports that travel so globally and have the same audience globally. I think it's a luring thought, but, you know, you take, you know, the Premier League, it's incredible here, it's massive here, and it's growing around the world, but it's disproportionately large here versus there. So just following the sort of maths, it's important to serve them here. And in any case, in other territories, you're really speaking about front of house and commentary and everything else, and they want to give it their own nuance. There are other sports that we do, like Formula One, where, you know, we'll do the commentary from Martin, and, you know, and Crofty will go out to 120 countries because it's carried as a global feed. So it's more nuanced, but our focus is always on serving, you know, our local viewers and our local fans, and that's true in Germany, and that's true in Italy, and that's true wherever we operate.
That's exactly the same for us. The only addition to that I would make is when we have, and actually Sky do this as well with their NBC coverage of golf. But when you do have global rights, and you have like the Champions League, where we've got exclusive rights in this market, but we also are UEFA's partners in Mexico and in Brazil. We use the scale of our broadcast capabilities in this market to add value in the other market. And, you know, Sky's done that with their coverage of golf and the PGA Tour, where we are the beneficiaries of the fact that they have a large-scale production capability in the US, and we're doing the same but in reverse because of our large-scale production capabilities in the UK around the Champions League, we're actually providing better content to the viewers in Mexico and Brazil because we can do that. So there are pockets of opportunity to unlock, but fundamentally sport is local content.
Dawn, as the chair of the FA Women's Super League, do you look as well to growing your sport globally, or is your primary function what's happening here in the UK? Because I think,
well, we're a domestic league, but we have a global interest. So
because it would help you for it to grow globally.
So we're in over 200 countries anyway. So the value of those overseas rights is really, really important to sort of the nascent economics of this sport. But the big money is invariably in your domestic territory. Will that change? Interesting question. Will one of the big streamers come along and say, you know what? Everyone looks at Apple and the deal they've done with MLS and think, I wonder if I fancy a bit of Women's Super League, because actually it is the most watched league, women's football league in the world. Let's put it on, literally buy all the rights, and let's see what happens. I think if you're a rights holder, those sort of deals you've got to be careful of them, because if it doesn't work out, you've really rather skewed the market, and potentially if you wanted to come back. But we look at the moment quite traditionally at get the best domestic deal one can do, and get off the back of that the best international distribution, and that's a pretty standard model. I think it's interesting though what's happening when you look at Premier League rights. I think it's right in saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that actually Premier League rights overseas are more valuable than they are domestically now. They're getting more money from overseas than domestically. That's quite extraordinary considering the levels that they are, and that heartens me, because I think, gosh, the women's game is going to follow that trajectory. So it's local, then it's global.
I'm not sure the MLS's deal with Apple will do MLS a massive service internationally. That's the challenge. That's the challenge with that.
That's what I think we're all watching.
Yeah.
I suspect other streamers will.
I mean, talking about Apple kind of leads on to my next question, and we're sort of coming towards the end of the panel. But what are your thoughts on big tech companies coming into the sporting broadcasting world? What do you think they can bring, or do you worry about the big economic power they bring as well? Could they cause problems in that way?
Look, I mean, we have Amazon participating today. They have Premier League today. They have a Champions League coming up, and they're active in pretty much all of Europe and the United States. So,
but they're just dabbling. I mean, I don't think Amazon have really gone in big. They're there.
That's true, but you could read that both ways, because they have the balance sheet if they wanted to go in big, and they sort of haven't. I think as I stand back from it, and I sort of eyeball most of big tech, I think they're very rational about what they do.
That's what I
think very deeply about how they do it. Nobody sort of gone and blown their brains out on buying something. I mean, that might happen, and who knows, and you can't do anything about it if they decide to do that. But I think they've got their own business models, and they pursue their own paths, and when we pursue ours. And
I think that's exactly right.
They made a bigger move in the US, right, with the Sunday ticket, and Amazon with Thursday, and with Apple with MLS. But again, it's a different business model than outside the US.
Yeah, and if they didn't go now, they have to wait 10 years. So, because it's a 10-year right cycle. So.
I think it's difficult to speculate about what they'll do, because they could do anything. They have the capability to do everything. What we can talk about is what they have done, and what they have done is being quite rational around what sport is doing for their core business. And that's even the way Apple spends money on their non-sports content. If you think about the amount of money they're spending and the volume of content they're producing, it's very different to other platforms, because they're looking at how it impacts their core business. So far, it's been quite rational. If it becomes irrational, then, hang on to your pants.
I think it's interesting. I've done a little bit of work with some of the tech companies like Apple, and I know from one of the sessions that I went to that they're really interested in sport. And their channel for sport, to get into sport, is the watch. They're looking at the iWatch as their platform of getting people to watch sport. And you're right. If they come in, you know, they've certainly got the money. You know, Dawn will be there straight away. Yeah.
I'll tell you, yeah, I'll know your street corner. No, I mean, I don't think, as you said, they don't do anything irrational. But I mean, if we go back in time, and I think the last time I was at RTS, I think sort of 2008 or 10 or something, a long, long time ago. And sort of everyone was sort of slightly skeptical about what Netflix were doing and how much money they were spending on acquisitions. And then, you know, fast forward 10 years, and what an extraordinary business model they've now built. But that is now maturing. So you sort of think, I wonder how they look at sport. Like exactly as you said, the conversations that you know in Apple, how are they thinking about sport? I don't know, but I sort of guarantee, I think that in Cambridge of 10 years hence, sport will be probably in a very different place in terms of not only how it's covered, where it's carried. You might even have the biggest properties that are going direct to consumers themselves because they want that data. They can have the production capability, and they're sufficiently confident that their asset is so valuable that they can own that relationship with the consumer. So I think everything could change. I mean, it's been very incremental to date, but we know this is an industry that's can be subject to incredible disruption. So I wouldn't dismiss them and think, they ain't done it yet. They haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting and exciting future with them, but I'm sure you guys will be up to the challenge, definitely, if the big tech comes in. But I just want to say a massive thank you to the panel for a really engaging and interesting conversation. I hope we've moved things on and hope you guys have picked plenty of stuff out from that. So please give a round of applause to our panel.